hitting rock bottom doesn't mean you have to stay there. That was the reason I found myself in front of a small, mundane office building in the outskirts of Berlin. It would turn out to be the greatest mistake of my life, even more so than all the shit I'd pulled before. To make a long story short, I had amassed a serious debt. Let's just say I'd thought I was far smarter than I was, and made a few questionable investments. I tried to find a way out, I did. There weren't many options available for a university dropout like me. Before long, I scurried to the less reputable parts of the internet for ways of making a few quick bucks. Nestled between shady offers and medical trials, I found one that piqued my interest. Company searching for beta testers of new virtual reality technology. I'd skimmed the article, but the moment I read that they'd pay me $100,000, I laughed it off and told myself it was nothing but a hoax or a scam. After a few phone calls, half a dozen emails, and a bit of research, I learned that the company and their offer were genuine. Why they were offering to pay so much, I didn't know. But damn, could I use it. To be honest, I'd expected to find a high-tech building, the type that consisted of nothing but glass and steel. The reality, as so often before, proved to be different. The moment I entered, the young woman behind the reception desk greeted me. "Welcome, can I help you? Are you here for the beta test?" Yes, I am. I handed her the invitation letter they'd sent me, and after giving it a short look, she nodded. "Great. We still have a bit of time, so please have a seat in the waiting area over there." She pointed at a compact room to my left. There was nothing inside that room apart from a few lonely chairs. Everything here gave me the impression of being quickly put together. The walls were bleak and empty, almost sterile. Was this really the office of some high-tech company? I took out my phone and went to Imagicom's website again to see if I'd somehow messed things up, when I heard a door opening. A well-groomed man in an expensive-looking suit walked up to me. "Mr. Perlow, welcome to Imagicom. It's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said, and shook my hand. "My name's Gabriel Brandt. I'm responsible for the beta test. We're stunned to have you with us," he said, with a smile that was so typical to business people. He'd probably perfected it over many years. "Likewise. Now, just a question, but how come you're paying so much money for a test like this?" His smile didn't waver for even a second, but I could see a slight squinting of the eyes. "Let's discuss the details in my office. We've got quite a few things to talk about anyway." I thought about pressing the issue, but figured I might as well listen to the rest of his proposal. "Sure. Lead on." He led me down a short hallway, which was just as bleak as the rest of the building. It seemed like we were the only people there, apart from the reception lady. Before I could look around more, though, Brandt opened a door and led me into his office. The room looked different than the rest of the building. It was almost completely white and seemed more modern, almost futuristic in design. A sleek white table filled the center of the room, and one wall was nothing but a giant display. Brandt motioned for me to sit down in a chair. Once he'd taken a seat opposite from me, he pressed a button somewhere below the table, and a video started to play on the display. It started with the catchline, "Imagicom presents the most immersive virtual reality experience ever." The video showed a quick succession of various photorealistic environments from a person's point of view. Then the system itself was showcased. It differed from anything I'd seen before. There was no bulky headset, no gloves, nothing like that. Instead, it showed a pair of connectors placed on a person's head, a sort of membrane one wore over their face, and a small black box responsible for connecting to Imagicom's cloud. "So, what do you think?" Brandt asked once the video was over. "Is this real? Looks like it's from a science fiction movie." Brandt smiled, but for the first time, his emotion seemed to be genuine. There was an edge to his expression, however. Something sharp. "Well, Mr. Perlow, reality isn't so different from science fiction anymore." So, if this is a beta test, I'll get to use one of those things, right? Somehow I wasn't convinced. This seemed way too advanced. To be honest, I expected the video was nothing but a marketing ploy to get some more investors. The actual system was probably way different. Indeed. You'll be the very first person to test our new system. Outside of your company, I assume. Naturally, he answered. And once more, he showed me his trained smile. Now, let me ask you again. Why are you paying such an exorbitant amount of money? Brant pressed another button, and a small touch display activated on the table in front of me. Well, to be honest, I'm only responsible for scheduling the beta test. You can find all the other details in the contact forms in front of you. Please take your time to read through them and sign them. And should you have questions, feel free to ask me. I started to read the first form. It was a simple non-disclosure agreement. The second one handled the eventuality of damaging the system itself, while the third one was on the company's terms and conditions. The fourth was another non-disclosure agreement, this time about the virtual environments. It was the fifth form that discussed the payment. It was a new revolutionary system. The compensation was so high because they required absolute secrecy about the system itself, and the virtual environments showcased. Here and there, details about the payment popped up, but there were dozens of these forms. I read the first few carefully, but before long I started to skim. Then I only took a few looks and eventually signed them without so much as reading the title. It still took me more than an hour to work through all of them. Well, that's that. All done, I said after I signed the last one. Perfect, Brant said, and the display in front of me vanished again. A moment later, a similar one appeared in front of him. Let me just cross-check everything. It should only take a few minutes. After a little while, he pressed another button. Cynthia, something to drink, please? How about coffee? He said out loud. A few minutes later, the reception lady entered the room and brought each of us a hot, steaming cup of coffee. She'd barely put it down when I took the first sip. God, I was tired. They'd scheduled the test to start at 8 in the morning. Not such an unusual time, you might say. The problem was, I had to make it into Berlin first. The company offered to book me a train ticket and pay for it, but it also meant I had to get up at 3 in the morning if I wanted to make it on time. I finished the whole cup in a matter of minutes, but it didn't seem to help one bit. I sat there drowsily while Brant took his time going through the documents. Well, Mr. Perlow, he said, and brought me back from my half-asleep state. Seems everything's in order. We're happy to start with the examinations right away. Examinations? It's all standard procedure. As explained in Form 32, Section D, you're required to pass a few additional evaluations. Please follow me. Before I could so much as frown, he pressed another button and the wall behind him slid open, revealing another hallway. I hadn't even noticed the sliding door until now. This part of the building was much more modern. The walls were pristine and stainless, the complete opposite of what I'd seen so far. It felt like we weren't even in the same building anymore. For the first time, I saw other people apart from Brant and Cynthia, the reception lady. There was a group up ahead chatting next to a futuristic vending machine, and others hurried up and down the long hallway. I was about to ask Brant about the company, but we'd already made it to the examination room. Hello there, I'm Dr. Catagua. A man in a lab coat introduced himself. He followed it up with a lengthy list and honors, and explained he was an expert in neuroscience. Brant gave him a brief nod before he hurried from the room. The evaluations lasted almost the entire day. They started with a detailed assessment of my general health and fitness. It was to make sure I didn't suffer from any serious health conditions like respiratory or cardiovascular problems. After that came several brain scans. Dr. Catagua explained that certain brain conditions could influence our perception of reality. A certain percentage of the population wouldn't be able to discern between reality and a simulated reality. For those people, the possibility of an actual injury existed, even in a simulation. The most common one was hurting or overstraining your muscles. The second, rarer one was nerve damage, because of the brain believing that a simulated injury was a genuine one. To avoid any of those, they had to make sure I didn't suffer from any of those brain conditions. I don't even know what sort of brain scans they did. Kotaku threw around so many terms, half of which I hadn't even heard before. CT, MRI, MRA, MRS, you name it. Once those were done, it was time for the last part, the psychological evaluation. The questions were all standard. Did I suffer from depression? Had I been diagnosed with any mental illnesses? Did I have any mental condition they might want to know about? The only condition I could tell them about was the ADHD I suffered from, and sometimes used medication for. They didn't linger on the topic for too long, and assured me it would be no problem. What they did seem to linger on, though, was phobias, general fears, and anxiety. After they'd asked me more than a dozen questions on the topic, I spoke up. Kotaku assured me it was all standard procedure, and important for the design of the simulation, and a smooth run of the beta test itself. So I explained that I suffered from slight bouts of anxiety because of my situation. As for phobias, I told them I suffered from arachnophobia, but I also added, embarrassed, that I wasn't fond of dark, confined places either. Once the psychological evaluation was over, it was already early evening. I realized I'd been here for more than half a day already, and the test hadn't even started yet. Still, I was exhausted, and apart from a quick lunch after the first half of the examination, I also hadn't eaten a damn thing. Thankfully, the company had prepared for all that. I'd expected them to have booked me a hotel or some other accommodation. Instead, they led me to what they referred to as my private quarters, for the duration of the beta test. The room was as modern as the rest of the complex. Half of it was made up of a bed that looked more comfortable than anything I'd ever slept in. There was also one of the giant wall displays opposite the bed. Before I could even ask, they informed me that dinner would be served in a few minutes. It was a juicy, tender piece of beef with a side of vegetables. After eating nothing but fast food and microwaved meals, it felt like heaven to me. Once I was done with the meal, I threw myself on the bed, activated the wall display, and switched through the available media. Most of it was long videos about nature, with low, relaxing background music. For a while, I watched colorful fish and stunning coral reefs, before I felt myself dozing off. When I woke up again, I couldn't feel the soft bedding anymore. Instead, I lay on a cold, damp floor. It took me a few moments to realize that I was somewhere different. I jerked up, confused. And when I looked around, I noticed that I was in an empty, dark room. The surrounding walls were damp, dirty, and covered in moss. A quick check revealed that I was still wearing my clothes, and my phone was still with me. The screen showed that it was already long past midnight, and that I didn't have a signal. Once the shock was over, I used the phone's flashlight to illuminate the area I was in. Old, brown stains covered the floor, and a pair of rusty chains dangled from a wall behind me. A few meters ahead of me was an opening that led into a tunnel. There was no other light source apart from my phone. Shit! What the hell was going on? How did I get here? Had I been kidnapped and put into some sort of torture dungeon? Had it all been a farce to lure me here? But why go through all that effort to... No, wait. Think, Andre. That's not it. This room? The tunnel ahead? I realized as fear washed over me. It was a dark, confined space, wasn't it? I remembered the evaluation. The questions about fears and phobias. As I realized, I grinned. They must have waited till I fell asleep and started the test. How I hadn't woken up through that ordeal was a mystery to me. Still, where I was right now had to be a simulation. and I was sure they wanted to see how I'd react to the situation I found myself in. Well, you got me, I said to no one in particular. So what now? You want me to explore or something? No answer. I crossed the room and put my hands against the walls. They felt cold, solid, musty. If I hadn't known I was in a simulation, I wouldn't have believed it. As a fresh surge of anxiety washed over me, I took a deep breath before I entered the tunnel. Now, here's the thing. You might know things aren't real and that you're in a simulation, but it doesn't help a single bit. However much I tried to convince myself, things felt and looked way too damn real. With each step, the sound of my footsteps reverberated through the gloomy tunnel ahead, and I couldn't help but cringe. The only other sound was the slow dripping of water from the ceiling. It didn't stay like that for long, though. After only a minute, I heard other, weirder sounds. The distant rattling of chains, and the sound of shuffling feet made me shiver. There's nothing here that can hurt you. None of it is real. I repeated those two lines over and over again, like a mantra. I considered going back, to retreating to the room I'd come from. But then what? Wait till they turned the damn thing off? And how long would that take? Slowly, another thought crawled into my mind and scratched at my sanity. It was the stupid, impossible thought of, what if this was no simulation after all? Calm down, Andre, calm down, I told myself, and pushed the thought back into the back of my mind. Still, this simulation was too damn real. They'd explained before that they were simulating all sorts of sensory inputs and transferring them into the brain. That was why it all felt so real. Once more, I reached out a shaking hand to touch the wall next to me. Cold, damp, and solid. If this wasn't real, shouldn't I be able to... Suddenly, a hand jerked from a hole in the wall I hadn't seen before. Shit! I called out and cringed back. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the outstretched hand. Who's there? I called out in a quiet voice. But all I heard was the rattling of chains from behind the wall. Whoever was behind that wall was panting, moaning, and after a few moments, the hand retreated. I stood there, frozen, afraid, and as I illuminated the tunnel ahead of me, I saw dozens of similar holes. Then, further ahead, I could make out a sturdy wooden door. As I stood there, more chains rattled. I heard the erratic shuffling of feet and bodies. More hands reached out, clawing at the walls, and wordless screams seemed to be directed at me. Fucking hell, I cursed as I hurried on, and pushed past all of them, repeating my mantra like before. Get away from here, I told myself. Get away and reach the end. Wherever that was. Right at that point, a distant, lonely light started flickering at the end of the tunnel. My steps got faster, passing hole after hole. But then I heard something. A growling ahead of me. Then someone screamed. There was a loud bump, the creaking of wood, and then the sturdy door I'd seen before was pushed outward. For a moment, dust and wood splinters filled the air. But then I saw it. A giant, bulging figure pushed itself from the doorway and into the tunnel. When I screamed in surprise and shock, the figure turned toward me. I cringed back a single step, then another, before I turned and ran back towards the room I'd awoken in. Behind me, another scream cut through the air, before I heard heavy footfalls from behind me. I ran with all the strength I could muster, but I didn't make it far. A giant paw of a hand came to rest on my shoulder. I was ripped backward, saw a terrifying, grinning face, and then all light vanished. I screamed and struggled against something on top of me. But when I opened my eyes, I was back in the same bed I'd fallen asleep in. What I'd been struggling against were the bed sheets. My heart was beating hard against my chest. As I lay there, my eyes darted around the room, afraid I would find the giant figure lurking somewhere inside my room. "You can calm down now, Mr. Perlow. There's nothing to be afraid of. It was all part of our simulation," a friendly female voice said. "What the hell was that?" I screamed. "Are you crazy? What if I'd gotten a heart attack? That thing was..." "I can assure you that your heart is fine. As you might recall, during the examinations, we informed you that a simulation won't put you in harm's way. The chances of you suffering a heart attack from the previous simulations were evaluated and deemed to be 0. "Fucking hell," I cursed. "I didn't sign up for this shit." "You indeed did, Mr. Perlow. In Section 2D of Form 54, you gave full consent to be subjected to simulated inputs of any sort without proper..." Yeah, I get it," I said with a sigh. "Have a good night, Mr. Perlow," the friendly voice said, before she disconnected with an audible click. "A good night. Yeah, right. Shit. What was that about a Form 54? Then I remembered how I'd not given any of the later forms so much as a glance. Shit. How could I have been so stupid? How many of those frickin' things had I signed? "Hey, I've got a question. Can you hear me?" Nothing. Shit. Guess they won't talk to me anymore. I cursed once more. If things got out of hand, though, I should be able to tell them I was out, right? There are rules to these sorts of things, aren't there? Annoyed and slightly worried, I turned back to the wall display and turned it on. The fish and the ocean depths were gone. Instead, the display showed a beautiful beach and a similarly beautiful woman walking through the sand. Well, better than nothing, I thought, and leaned back to listen to the quiet, relaxing background music. As the video continued, the woman approached the camera, getting closer with each step. The moment I could make out her face, I noticed that she was crying. "Help me," she spoke up. Alright, what the hell? While I searched for the display's small remote, she repeated it over and over. "Help me, Andre," she suddenly said, emphasizing the name. My name. When I looked up again and found her eyes resting on me, I felt goosebumps all over my arm. "You have to," she said once more, her face growing harder. What the hell? I pressed out, confused. "You dare not to help me?" she screamed at me. I finally found the remote to turn the damn thing off, but whatever I pressed, there was no reaction. Instead, her face grew angrier and angrier, becoming a distorted version of her former beautiful self. And then, to my horror, she got even closer. By that point, her face filled out the entire display. A moment later, she pushed her giant head forward. Not against the display, but out of it. Right in my direction. I screamed, jumped off the bed, and hurried for the door. But it wouldn't open. When I turned around, I saw in disbelief that her giant head was inside my room. It dangled from a long, stretched-out neck that vanished somewhere in the depths of the wall. "You dare to ignore me?" the creature screamed again, and my ears rang because of her bellowing scream. I pushed my hands over my ears, then threw myself against the door. Once, twice, and then when I did it a third time, the door sprang open, and I pushed myself outside. What the fuck was that shit? The answer popped into my head right away. I was still in the simulation. I had to be. There was no doubt about it. The moment I'd woken up, there'd been no connectors, no facial mask, nothing at all. They must have ended one simulation and plunged me straight into the next one. A simulated version of my private quarters. They tricked me, complete with the call of an assistant to tell me the simulation was over. No, wait. That wasn't correct. She'd never said a word about it being over, had she? As I stood there in the hallway, the same woman spoke up again. Mr. Perlow, if you'd please continue down the hallway to room number 34. Please take a seat there so we can continue with the test. I looked up, but there was no sign of where the voice was coming from. For a moment, I looked around before I started on my way down the hallway. Everything looked the same as when I'd arrived here. The walls, the doors, only the people were gone. But I was still in the simulation, I told myself. When I made it to room number 34, I saw that it was the same examination room I'd been in before. I looked around for a moment, but I was alone. Eventually, I plopped down in a chair. Right away, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jerked around to find Dr. Katagwa standing next to me. Mr. Perlow, are you alright? I looked at him in confusion. Wait, why are you... I broke up and shook my head. The man stared at me for a moment before he frowned. We were just finishing your MRI when you passed out. Yeah, sure I did. Hilarious. This is nothing but a simulation. His frown deepened and a worried expression replaced it. You haven't entered the simulation yet, Mr. Perlow. Your tests are all scheduled for tomorrow and the day after. Today, we're evaluating your mental and physical capabilities. I laughed a bit. Whatever you say. So what sort of test is this going to be? Mr. Perlow. He started again, his voice serious. Do you often suffer from episodes such as this one? What episodes? Oh, you mean this? No, never before I entered the simulation. His face still showed a worried expression. What I'm talking about are episodes of prolonged memory loss, distorted memories, vivid daydreams, or hallucinations. I didn't react. Instead, my eyes scanned the room. Can you come here for a moment? I got up and stepped over to one of the monitors. What you see here is a small swelling in your visual cortex. It's not necessarily anything malicious or dangerous, but as I said, it might lead to various problems related to your memory. I'm asking since what you're talking about might be an indicator for... Alright, is this some sort of sick joke? I called towards the ceiling of the room. Did you put me into the simulation because of my stupid ADHD? Mr. Perlow, please calm down. You're disturbing the rest of the personnel. Now please, tell me what you remember about your trip here to Munich. What the hell are you talking about? You arrived here at our Munich facility this morning to test our new immersion rig. With that, Dr. Katagwa pointed to a different contraption. One I'd never seen before. It looked almost like a giant wheel a person could be strapped to. A variety of gadgets, a visor, a headset, and gloves were connected to it. You signed up for a beta test for compensation of $1,000. The test is scheduled to last between 2 and 4 days. Wait, hold on. This is bullshit. I laughed, but it came out more nervous than I'd hoped for. I'm still in the simulation. People who suffer from damage to their visual cortex can often suffer from a different perception of reality. This can not only lead to false interpretations of what's in front of you, but can also lead to distorted memories. It's often influenced by a person's subconscious beliefs and wishes. Alright, very funny. First of all, the equipment I used was totally different, and I was offered a compensation of... But then I broke off. Distorted memories influenced by personal wishes? When I thought about it, would anyone really pay $100 grand to test some piece of technology? For now, I'll take a look at the test results. See if what I found might impede you from joining the test. Depending on those results, it might be better to schedule an examination at a nearby hospital. For now, though, we should start on the general physical examination. I nodded and smiled, but I couldn't shake off the weird feeling that flooded over me. This was a simulation, wasn't it? They were just trying to fuck with my brain again. There was no damn way I could have imagined any of the stuff that happened before. Alright, Jesus, Andre. Don't fall for their shit again. You're in a frickin' simulation. None of this is real. Right, I said to Catagua. Let's go do this stupid fitness test then. The man frowned at my answer, but nodded. The test was way simpler than before. Catagua led me to an exercise bike in the back of the room, and tested my heart rate and my general stamina. Nothing else. The same was true for the psychological evaluation. He just asked me a handful of questions, and that was it. Once it was all over, he called an assistant that led me from the room. When I stepped outside, I stopped for a moment. The hallway was different. There weren't any pristine white walls. Instead, it looked like any other office building I'd seen before. Nothing about the place screamed high-tech or fancy. The same was true for my private quarters. It reminded me of a room in a simple hostel. There was a bunk bed, a small nightstand, and an old cupboard. The assistant who led me there excused himself and hurried away. Once he'd left, I slumped on the bed and took out my phone. I opened WhatsApp and had a look at my messages. The last one I'd sent was to my best friend, telling him about a beta test in Munich I would take part in. Yeah, it's not a lot of money. At least I won't have to eat just ramen for a month, I'd written to him. I frowned at that. It sounded like me. Exactly the way I talk about myself. But I didn't remember writing that message. Hell, I had told no one about the amount of compensation I'd be paid. This is bullshit. With that, I dropped the phone on the bed next to me and leaned back. None of this was real anyway. A few minutes later, I got up and hit my fist against the wall. I don't know why I did it, but the result was as expected. The resulting pain felt real enough. I picked up the phone again and had a look at my emails. It was all there. The instructions, the compensation for my travels, everything. Only the details were all different. While I read through the emails, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, a nervous-looking man stood outside. His eyes were wide and darted left and right before he pushed himself past me. Hey, what are you... Quiet! Close the door! I laughed and did as he told me. Alright, what now? Listen, I know this will sound weird, but everything that's going on here is not what it's supposed to be. Yeah, no shit, I said. This is all just a simulation. The man's face turned grim, and a wordless curse escaped his mouth. Then he leaned forward, putting his face right in front of mine. Alright, you're not in a simulation. They're trying to make you believe you're in one. That's not what's going on here. This whole damn thing has nothing to do with any virtual reality technology. Did you inspect the damn rig? All those gadgets? Why would you need all that for virtual reality? It's all a front. They'll run you through test after test, reschedule them before they tell you they found some anomaly. Let me guess. Your brain or your heart, right? When I looked up, the man smiled knowingly. Where do you think you're at? Where's that simulation you're in taking place? Berlin, I said in a quiet voice. The man grinned. Mine was scheduled in Dortmund. We've got someone else here who said they were in Hamburg. Another guy just 2 rooms further down said he went to Munich. So where the hell are we? The guy laughed. Don't you get it? No one knows. We all think we're in different locations. You might think you're in Munich or Dresden or Hamburg, but that's not where we are. Did they give you anything to drink when you arrived? Coffee? Water? Maybe a soda? I nodded once more. They spiked it with some shit. Some new fucked up drug that scrambles up your memory. Once you're in here, you won't have any clue what's real and what's not. It's all because of that damn drug. None of the participants here have a clue what's going on. I went back to the bed and picked up my phone. Once more, I went over the emails. That's when I noticed something else was wrong. The dates. I talked to them for almost 2 weeks, so why were all the emails from the beginning of this month? Then I checked the date on my phone. I stared at it, confused. Wait, why was it only the 4th? I got here on the 12th, didn't I? The WhatsApp message I'd sent to my friend yesterday was dated the 3rd. If this was... That's how they get you. The guy cut me off. It was right at this point that the door opened. I recognized Brant by his trained smile right away. Mr. Perlow, nice to meet you. I'm Mr. Zimmer, the CEO of Imagicom. I see you've already met Mr. Schuster, one of our other participants. Schuster's face changed, and for a moment, an expression of pure terror was visible. He fought hard to suppress it before he turned to the supposed CEO. Mr. Zimmer, I better get going. I'm sure you have things to talk about with Mr. Perlow here. With that, he gave me and Brant, no, Zimmer, a nod and hurried from the room. All right, Mr. Zimmer, I started and emphasized the name. Where's Mr. Brant? Brant? We don't have anyone working here by that name. I'm not sure who you're referring to. I'm talking about the man who showed me the introduction video. And, Dr. Katagwa. His first name is Satoshi, in case you're wondering. Brilliant man. He informed me about the anomaly he discovered during your brain scans. However, he already said it doesn't seem to be serious. If we make a few changes to the simulation, there shouldn't be any problems with the beta test. He continued to ramble on about the test and what was to come, but I didn't listen anymore. My head was throbbing. This was all too damn real and way too fucking strange. Why would anyone even go through all this effort and create a simulation like this? Why? As I stood there, I thought about what you're supposed to do when you find yourself in a dream and want to wake up. Would something like that even work in a simulation? Shit, I had no clue. Until then, you're at your leisure, Mr. Perlow. We'd like you to stay in your room if possible, but we understand if you're interested in the project itself. If you need any additional information, our promotional manager, Mr. Wittich, in room 14B, would be more than happy to have a talk with you. Well, I've got to get going. Thanks again for joining our beta test. Please be at the ready at 4 to continue with the schedule. With that, he left the room. For a moment, I stood there, trying to figure out how to prove what was real and what wasn't. As my eyes scanned the room, I noticed something. It was small and partway hidden behind the ceiling lamp. I could only see it from a certain position. Was that a camera? Why was it way up there, and why was it hidden like this? Were they spying on me? I stared at it for a while before I turned away. Was this really a simulation? Would they put all those details in? Shit, this entire thing was driving me insane. I couldn't stay in this room anymore. The longer I sat still, the more confused I got. A few moments later, I was outside again, and started to walk down the hallway. A lot of other people in office attire flocked the hallway, going about their normal workday. Yet, somehow, when I passed them, they all looked up, watched me, and whispered to one another. It made my skin crawl in the worst possible way. Something was definitely wrong here. As I continued, I wondered how big this place was. It felt like the hallway went on forever. I passed room after room and other identical hallways. For a moment, I felt disoriented, as if I was trapped in a maze. I was about to follow down a different hallway when I bumped into Schuster. He looked up at me with a serious expression. "We've got to get out of here," he whispered at me. "What?" I just saw what they're doing to... Good God. He shivered before he got a hold of my arm and pulled me after him. Schuster walked normally, trying his best to make a bit of small talk. But as he dragged me along, I saw how sweaty he was, and how much he fought to keep the anxiety at bay. "What did you see?" I asked him again. "I don't know. There were people strapped to these things, but they're bleeding and..." He broke up again. There was yet another group of office workers up ahead that eyed us with curious interest. Schuster seemed to be as disoriented as I was, his eyes darting left and right as he chose his directions haphazardly. Finally, though, we arrived at an enormous glass door. Schuster pushed it open, and we entered a giant lobby. The moment we got there, the woman behind the reception desk looked up. "Mr. Perlow, Mr. Schuster, can I help you?" Schuster didn't say a thing. He hurried towards the building's entrance door. He pushed, then threw himself against it. But the door wouldn't budge. For a moment, I looked at the receptionist. I could have sworn I saw a smile on her face. "Mr. Schuster, we've been over this before," she started in a warm, friendly voice. "Unfortunately, you're not allowed to leave the premises until the end of your clinical trial." "No, fuck your trial. Getting out of here. You're all insane. This entire thing here is insane." When Schuster began to beat against the door with all the force he could muster, the receptionist pressed a button. A moment later, two men in suits appeared in the lobby. When Schuster saw them, he freaked out, screaming obscenities at them. The men didn't waver. They walked up to him and restrained him with next to no effort. "Mr. Schuster, everything's all right," one of them whispered to him while he struggled against their grip. "It's just the after effects of the new medication. Everything's all right," the other chimed in. As they said this, Schuster was still screaming, still struggling while they dragged him back through the glass door. "What the hell is going on here?" I yelled at the receptionist. "I'm very sorry about that, Mr. Perlow. Mr. Schuster is part of a different test group. A test for a new type of medication against certain mental issues. Unfortunately, some test subjects suffered from mild cases of reality distortion and paranoia. I assure you, though, it's normal. No reason for concern." "No reason for... What?" He was fucking screaming. "What the hell are you gonna... You know what? I'm out of here. It doesn't even matter if this is some fucked up simulation or if this is real. I'm fucking out." "It's all standard procedure, Mr. Perlow," she continued. "Might I remind you of paragraph 5 on Form 27? Unless there's an imminent danger of brain damage or cardiovascular arrest, the beta test will continue. Now, of course, you're free to end the test here and now, Mr. Perlow, but we will pay no compensation in that case. Furthermore, as paragraph 11 on Form 41 states, should a person quit the beta test after giving their official consent, a Magicom will be forced to take legal action, which might include fines of substantial height." I stood there and listened as she rambled on about some damn legal matters. "What the hell are you talking about? What's that about those damn forms? You can't just..." But I broke up when the two men that had taken Schuster away appeared again. "We can assure you, Mr. Perlow, we can indeed." With that, the two men got hold of my arms. I struggled against their grip, but soon realized that they were much stronger than me. As they dragged me back toward the hallway, they whispered the same calming words they had at Schuster before. They didn't even react when I called them out on their bullshit. I thought they would bring me back to my room, but they dragged me to the examination room. Catawba was already there, waiting for me, smiling. "Excellent news, Mr. Perlow," he said with excitement. "We've just got confirmation that you're eligible to take part in our test." Catawba's face transformed, twisted by a sadistic smile. "The fuck kind of test are you..." I couldn't keep talking anymore because one of the two men pushed a gag into my mouth. "Well then, why don't you take Mr. Perlow down to Hall B? I think Model 13 should be free at the moment." With that, they dragged me outside again, down the hallway. The few office workers who were still around watched the entire ordeal with excited faces. "You should be honored, Mr. Perlow. You'll be contributing to the advancement of human society," Catawba rambled on. I wanted to say something, scream at him, and call him insane, but the damn gag didn't allow for any of it. All that escaped my mouth were muffled, indistinguishable sounds. It wasn't long before Catawba pushed open the door to another room. much bigger than any I'd been in before. The moment we entered, the iron smell of blood reached me, and I could hear the low moans and muffled screams of the other participants. They were all strapped to the wheel-like contraptions Catawba had called their new immersion rig. The moment I saw them, I fought against the grip of the two men once more. The first participant was twisting and shaking against the restraints of the contraption. A gag covered another's mouth, and I could see the blood that streamed from the visor, could hear his muffled screams. Yet another's teeth were grinding against one another before they started biting at their own lips and leaving a tattered, bloody mess. And then, way further down, in the last contraption, I saw Schuster. He was barely recognizable anymore. Blood leaked from his mouth, the visor, and the headphones. His arms and legs looked different, twisted, as if the joints had popped and his tendons had snapped. He dangled there almost lifelessly, only twitching once in a while. Catawba's eyes wandered to the man. "Well, guess Model 17 is available for a new participant already," he said with a smile. I stared at the man, wide-eyed. "Oh, don't you worry, Mr. Perlow. It's all standard procedure. There's not a thing you've got to worry about." As the two men started to strap me to Model 13, I inhaled sharply, mustered up all my strength, and threw myself forward. One restraint snapped open, then another, and I was free. Adrenaline rushed through my veins, and I could somehow avoid both men's outstretched arms. In an instant, I was out in the hallway. I heard Catawba scream after me, and a second later, the two men came running after me. All I could do was run. I pushed on, down one hallway, then another. I ran left, then right, almost crashed into a group of office workers before I changed directions again. Where the hell was I even going? I had no idea where the damn lobby even was. Everything looked the same. The walls, the rooms, even the people. I hurried around another corner and threw myself into the first room I saw. With shaking hands, I took out my phone. I dialed the number for the police, but nothing happened. Fuck, I realized. I didn't have a signal. I scanned the room and instantly saw the glass paneling that separated me from the outside world. If nothing else, then... I picked up a chair standing in the room and hurled it against the panel. The chair crashed against the glass, right as my two pursuers stormed into the room. They were still smiling the same smile, still uttering the same reassuring words. I avoided the first man's grip, threw him to the ground, but right at that moment, the second man tackled me. His body crashed into mine, and I was thrown backward. I felt the impact as my body crashed against the glass paneling. Then there was the sound of shattering glass, as the surface exploded into 1,000 pieces. For the blink of an eye, I was weightless. There was no impact, though. Instead, I lay in the soft grass. I freaked out, jumped up, but felt no pain. There was no damage, no blood, and no glass. When I turned around, the office building had vanished too. It had all been a fake, a farce. It had been nothing but another one of their fucked up simulations. As I sat up in the grass, I realized it had all been fake. The entire second reality, the insane Catawba, and even the supposed brain damage I was suffering from, it had all been another part of their simulation. I grew angry before rage overtook me. The fuck do you think you're doing? This is fucked up. I thought it was real. I thought... This is insane. Why don't you just get me out of here right now and... Mr. Perlow, I'd like to remind you... A voice popped out of nowhere. On Form 48, Paragraph 4, Point C, you specifically agreed to... Yeah, well, fuck off! I screamed in answer. This time, the voice didn't say anything else. I stood up and looked around. I was in a meadow, and further ahead was a small lake. The moment I saw it, nostalgia washed over me. I knew this lake. It was the one that had been right next to the village my grandparents lived at. I let my eyes wander around and recognized the old cherry tree nearby, the dirt path that led to the village, and even the distant forests. How in the hell had they created all this? Had they researched my past, or had they somehow scanned my memories? How is something like this even possible? After a while, not knowing what else to do, I began walking up the path that would lead me to the village. I was stuck in here anyway, without a way to end the simulation myself, and I had to admit, I wanted to see the old village. I'd barely taken a few steps when I found an old bike lying in the grass. I noticed the black-red metallic color, the old dirty gears, and the rusted bell. This was the mountain bike I'd owned as a kid. The memories of childhood returned to me, and I saw myself racing down dirt paths and forest tracks. I couldn't help but smile. Things were so different back then. For a moment, I considered picking up the bike, but I was way too tall to drive it anyway. The path from the lake led to a tiny hill, and once I'd made it up there, my eyes grew wide. I couldn't believe it. Once more, I wondered how they'd created all this. For a while, I just stood there marveling at the sight below. There was the huge old farmstead. Here were the holiday homes at the edge of the village. Further away was the downtown part of the village, with the church at its center. In front of me, though, was the part that my eyes rested on the longest. It was the lowest part of the village, which consisted of only a handful of houses. One of them, my grandparents'. It had been over 15 years since I had last been there. As I continued on my way, I couldn't help but be impressed by how real everything was. I felt the grass against my legs, the sun on my face, and I could smell the fresh summer air. You could almost forget you were in a simulation, I thought. No, I reminded myself. Don't fall for it again, you idiot. Not for a second time. Hell, a third time. My steps led me to my grandparents' house, almost on autopilot. It was a small house with a barn next to it. They'd been farmers for the better part of their lives. When I was born, though, they had already abandoned the old trade and had opted for a more relaxed way of living. The closer I got, the more memories returned to me. I felt goosebumps on my arm when I saw the cat in the grass nearby. It eyed me curiously, and when I noticed the brownish-gray stripes on its back, I knew that it had to be my grandma's old cat, Leo. The cat watched me for a few more moments before it came over to me, purring and rubbing itself against my legs. Hey, little guy. I greeted it and leaned down to pet it. I wondered how they'd gotten everything right up to the smallest detail. Then, I wondered if this was really what my grandma's cat had looked like. What if they just created a vague image of a cat, and my brain made the necessary connections that weren't there and filled in the gaps? Was that how they did all this? Providing nothing but a vague framework for the rest of the brain to work with? While I stood there, petting the cat and thinking about this, the sky suddenly grew darker. Within moments, thick clouds had formed and blocked out the sun before it began to rain. It wasn't long before the rain had turned into a full-on downpour. Sure, it was a simulation, but I still felt myself getting wet and felt the cold, gusty wind. Within moments, I was freezing, and hurried to the open front door of the house. I watched as the downpour continued and saw Leo rush away into the barn. They'd done it all, to the most minute detail. As I stood there, I wondered why they'd thrown me into a simulation like this. Why my grandparents' house? Then, something crawled back into my mind. As I stood there in the small entry hall, I shivered as a memory came back to me. The memory of the single worst day of my entire childhood. I'd never told them about that day. Hell, I buried it so deep inside my mind, I hadn't even remembered it until now. So how did they know about it? No, I told myself. I would not go in. I would not enter this house. They couldn't make me, could they? I rushed back outside. All care about the downpour or the cold had vanished. I'd make it to one of the other houses or just over to the barn. I don't know what I was expecting. If I thought I could actually do anything. What I wasn't expecting were the spiders that suddenly swarmed the ground. At first, there were only a few, but soon it was hundreds, thousands. They covered the grass, the trees, the barn, everything. Everything but my grandparents' house. For a moment, I closed my eyes. If I don't see them, they can't hurt me, right? None of this was real. It was a simulation. Just run, you damn idiot. Run and get away from here. Yet I'd barely taken a few steps when I could feel them crawling all over me. They made their way up my legs, my back, even my arms. I shuddered, tried to ignore it, but finally, I screamed, opened my eyes and swatted them off of me. I was shaking, and as I looked ahead, I saw that the entire village, no, the entire outside world was covered in thick, heavy spider webs. This whole simulation had become some arachnophobic hell. When I couldn't fight it anymore, when my phobia kicked in with full force, I rushed back into the house. I didn't want to go in there again, but my body didn't seem to listen to me anymore. Still, I knew why they forced me to go back there. This time, they couldn't make me. No, I wouldn't move. I'd stay down here next to the front door. Once more, the dreaded memory pushed itself into my head. I lost my balance and started shaking and sweating. You goddamn pieces of shit. Fuck you! I screamed up at the empty, quiet house. The last time I'd been here was a few days after my grandma had died. After that day, I'd never been to that house again, and I'd never wanted to return to it. My grandpa had died when I was 10 years old, and after his death, my grandma had lived on her own. She died 1 year later. I shuddered thinking about the day I found her. I sat down on the ground and didn't do a damn thing. All I did was breathe slowly and steadily to keep the panic at bay as I watched the spiders outside. Mr. Perlow, we have to inform you again that you are required to participate in the simulation. We are aware that you know where you're supposed to go. Should you remain there without continuing, we're forced to... Just shut the fuck up. I'm not doing it. I'm not going in there. I screamed again, without moving a single inch. I tried. I honestly tried. But how can you fight something that you've got no control over? What can you do in a world that can become anything, and do anything to you? I sat there unmoving. But after a short while, the spiders outside grew restless, and they rushed towards the building. I could barely throw the front door shut, but I could feel it. The pressure of thousands of spiders trying to force their way in. Then I heard it. The sounds. The sounds of spiders crawling and skittering all over the walls outside. As I desperately pushed myself against the door, I saw the windows, the glass, the cracks. A moment later, the glass gave way, and a flood of spiders made their way inside. They weren't crawling inside. They swept into the building. It was nothing but an endless wave of eight-legged horrors. Within moments, they filled the entire first floor of the building. In my panicked state, I picked the only direction that wasn't covered in them. The stairs to the second floor. The spiders were coming after me, chasing me. I could feel them on my legs, my arms. I felt them tearing at my skin and biting into my flesh. In a panic, I ripped them from my body by the dozens before I threw myself into the only room that wasn't infested with them. I was a shivering, shaking mess. Bloody bites covered my arms and legs. Tears streamed from my eyes. and I was too exhausted even to curse. It was only after a few minutes of calming down that I noticed the sweet, disgusting smell that wafted through the air. I realized where I was. In a state of shock, I turned away from the door to take in the sight in front of me. It was my grandma's bedroom. She was right there, lying in her bed, unmoving. The same as she'd been when I was 11 years old. This time, though, I knew what was in front of me. Right there, between the sheets, was the decomposing body of my grandma. She'd been dead for almost 4 days when I found her. Back then, my parents and I lived in a small town only a few kilometers away from her. One day, on a whim, I decided to go visit her. After Grandpa's death, she'd become a lonely woman and had isolated herself from the rest of the world. Still, I loved my grandma, and I thought she'd be happy to see me. When I didn't find her outside, I searched the house, and finally found her up in her bedroom. A wave of a disgusting, sweet smell hit me when I opened the door. The same smell I'd known from bad, rotten apples. I remember walking up to my grandma to wake her, telling her that there must be some apples that had gone bad. It was only at this point that I saw the state she was in. Her face was not that of my grandma anymore. Because of the summer heat and the stuffy air inside the room, it had become a bloated, mushy heap of flesh, covered by maggots and flies. I remember screaming and running from the house, only to be found by a neighbor. It was he who'd called the doctor and the mortician. For years, the memory of her rotten face, the sweet smell of her rotting body, had stayed with me before I'd been able to bury it. It was the same sweet smell that now crawled up my nostrils. I froze, unable to move or do anything. Suddenly, I was 11 years old again. I was not Andre Perlo, the 27-year-old man in a virtual reality simulation. No. I was little Andy, a scared 11-year-old boy in his dead grandma's bedroom. After the initial shock was over, I turned back to the door of the room, but I couldn't see it anymore. Where the door had been was now nothing but a solid wall. I looked around, confused, but there was no hint of it anywhere. The door had vanished. I went forward, hitting and beating against the wall, hoping to find a way out. With each passing second, the smell of rot grew more and more intense. I gagged, pushed myself as far away from the bed as I could, back into the corner of the room. I cried. I screamed and pleaded with them to end the simulation. The money didn't matter anymore. Nothing did. All I wanted was to get out of the simulation. As I sat there rambling on and on, I heard a different sound. At first, I thought it was the spiders again. But then I heard it again. A quiet, wet squishing. I almost vomited when a fresh wave of the rotten stink hit me. My eyes watered. I blinked once, twice, and then I saw it. In front of me, between the sheets, Grandma's body was moving. I thought it was a reaction because of the decay, but it wasn't. In sheer and total horror, I watched as her rotten corpse got up, and her bloated, mushy face focused on me. Her lips were gone. Her eyes were tiny, shriveled up like dried raisins. The worst, though, was the maggots that now fell from it in droves. I screamed, scrambled back against the wall, began beating on it, throwing myself against it, to get away somehow. But it was futile.
Oh, my dear little Andy.
I heard a distorted version of her voice. The words were barely distinguishable from each other. Not much more than a wet gurgle.
How nice of you. Come visit your old grandma.
The bedsheets parted, and I could see the full, disgusting horror of her rotten body. The bed was almost a sea of body fluids, and she was nothing but an amalgamation of wet, mushy flesh. Her body was torn open, revealing her insides. As she pushed herself to her feet, something big and wet burst from her abdomen and onto the bedsheets below. For a moment, she wavered, almost collapsed into herself. But then she moved, crawled toward me.
Oh, how Grandma missed you, little Andy.
And then, as she touched me, as I felt a wet, squishy hand on my shoulder, despair overtook me. The world stopped existing at this point. My mind broke and I clawed at the wall. I ripped at the wallpaper, dug into the plaster and the brickwork below, until my fingers were nothing but bloody stumps. My consciousness retreated, and became an audience to my perils, and could do nothing as I mutilated my body. At first, the only sounds I heard was the scratching of my flesh and bones against the plaster. But then, the same wet gurgling started again. Grandma was singing an old nursery rhyme, the one she'd sang me when I couldn't fall asleep. As I lay there, as I couldn't go on anymore, she closed her rotten arms around my crippled, mutilated body. I don't know how long the embrace lasted. Every second felt like an eternity, and her song seemed to go on in endless repetition. All the while, her body decomposed further and further as she held me. I can't tell you when or how the simulation ended. I only remember struggling against the grip of other people. The details are nothing but a blur. There was security personnel, an ambulance, and finally, I awoke in a hospital in Berlin. A plump nurse was checking my vital signs, and looked up in surprise when she saw I was awake. As she rushed from the room, everything felt different. It was my head, my brain. As the memory of Grandma's rotting body came back to me, I screamed again. They gave me a heavy dose of sedatives, and once I'd calmed down enough, one of the doctors explained what had happened. After the test of some electronic device had gone horribly wrong, they had brought me here. Apart from a few bruises, there was no visible external damage. Most of the injuries I'd suffered were related to the brain and nervous system. Shock washed over me, and I tried to push myself up, but my hands and fingers didn't react. I tried again, but I could barely move them. Couldn't even ball my hands into fists. As I stared at my almost useless appendages, tears streamed from my eyes. The doctor stood there, an expression of misery visible on his face. He spoke, but I barely listened. Full recovery was out of the question. Partial functionality might be possible. Various approaches, therapy, and on he went. Somehow, though, I could tell that I was damaged beyond repair. I knew, and I cried. The brain damage I'd sustained was more severe than originally thought. I had trouble recalling certain memories, and anything beyond simple math problems were impossible for me. I don't know if I'd ever been smart before all this, but I knew I wasn't anymore. The most serious issue was the complete loss of my sense of smell. The doctors didn't know why, but I know the reason. I know that while the rotten corpse of my grandma held me, the smell must have been too much for my psyche. My brain must have cut off my sense of smell. I stayed at the hospital for months. Once I could leave, people urged me to sue Imagicom. I went to a lawyer, explained my situation. But it was not even a week before he got back to me. There wouldn't be a case. Imagicom was a subsidiary of a huge international conglomerate. They had all the money in the world to bury any case against them. Even worse, though, they'd provided him with all the forms I'd signed. And in them, I'd agreed to pretty much anything. Even the eventuality of lasting damage to my body. There was nothing that could be done. It's been more than a year since the entire thing happened, but I've only been able to write it down now. It was a long and arduous process, with only the 2 fingers of my left hand remaining functional after all this. But there's one last thing I have to mention. The funniest, most fucked up thing about all of this. The day I was released from the hospital and sent back home, I checked my bank account. I laughed for hours when I saw the huge 6-digit number of $100,000 that had been transferred to my account the day the beta test ended. They'd fucking paid me. They'd paid me in full. Just like they'd promised. I have enough money now. Enough to get rid of my debt. I've gotten a second chance in life. Only now, as damaged as I was, I wouldn't be able to make anything of it. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.